Donald Trump is going to the pokey. Indicted again, almost. There's a target on his back, yes, because he committed many criminal offenses while being president of the United States. So as I predicted, the Department of Justice is absolutely going to indict Donald Trump again. He received a letter, and there's a genius behind the strategy of Jack Smith, and I'm going to highlight some of that genius. Here's a former federal prosecutor who's currently running for president, the former governor of New Jersey. Here's what he had to say.
We also learned that former top White House officials, including Jared Kushner, have been called before the January 6th grand jury. Kushner reportedly told the grand jury that Trump sincerely believed that he won. What do you make of that, number one? And what do you make of the fact that Smith has reached that deep into the Trump White House?
Well, first off, it shows that Jack Smith's running a serious investigation. And that's what he should be doing, because the American people are owed at least that much by someone who has the authority that Jack Smith has. And if you're gonna bring charges regarding to January 6th, you better be right. And you better have proof beyond a reasonable doubt that a jury's gonna be able to understand, and that's unimpeachable. As far as what's going on with Donald Trump in terms of these charges, the fact is that he doesn't believe he won. He was concerned before the election that he was losing. And I know that because he said it to me directly. He knows he didn't win, but his ego, George, won't permit him to believe that he's the only person in America outside the state of Delaware to ever have lost to Joe Biden. And so his ego is running that. And am I surprised that Jared Kushner would say that? He doesn't want to be disinvited to Thanksgiving, George, so he said what he needed to say.
We shall see what actually comes of it. The indictment may have already happened, and it could be sealed and released later. That is allowable under the statutory guidelines of the federal government. Now, let's do this. Put him up full mass. Donald Trump, former president of the United States, he is already facing roughly 80 criminal indictments when you combine Manhattan and the current federal indictments. He also will face, in my opinion, indictments from Fulton County, Georgia. I believe those indictments will come in about 2 to 3 weeks. New York will likely indict him at some point as well. So on Tuesday, the ex-president decided to go to Truth Social, the social media network he started after being kicked off of Twitter for inciting an insurrection. He wanted to tell people on Sunday night, that Jack Smith sent him a letter informing him that he was the target of the DOJ's criminal investigation into his attempt to stay in power after losing the 2020 election to Joe Biden. Now, before I go to what was actually said, please keep in mind the government is not required to send you a courtesy letter. So if they send you one, it is typically strategic. And Donald Trump is going to have to respond to this letter, or maybe he doesn't. But there's no chance that Donald Trump would not. So the federal government, under the direction of the lead prosecutor, said send him a letter. Let him know. He'll make the announcement for us. And that's what he did. It puts Trump on the defensive quickly. He has to defend what he proclaims is a witch hunt. Additionally, his attorneys, well, they're saying nothing. There's more. Trump wrote, deranged Jack Smith, the prosecutor with Joe Biden's DOJ, sent a letter, again, it was Sunday night, stating that I am a target of the January 6th grand jury investigation, and giving me a very short 4 days to report to the grand jury, which almost always means an arrest and indictment. Trump, you're right, sir. The last time you got one of these, you already indicted. This was under seal. So what do you think has already happened? There you go. Okay, so you have 4 days. What are you going to do? Now, typically, the federal government at this point would have absolutely filed a motion to stop Donald Trump from talking. It's called a gag order because Trump is utilizing his platform in order to perhaps influence a potential jury and complicate the investigative patterns of the case. In this instance, the federal government has said, we're not going to file that motion. As a matter of fact, if there was a motion to make Trump talk more, that would be the motion they would file. But it doesn't exist. There's more. While Trump is known for saying a lot of things on social media that are obviously not true, New York Times reporter Maggie Haberman tweeted Tuesday that a source familiar with the matter confirmed that Trump did indeed receive such a letter, which the Times reported is a quote sign that he is likely to be indicted in the case. If this all sounds weirdly familiar to you, okay? If it sounds weirdly familiar to you, that's because last month, we learned that Smith, let's put him up, had told Trump he was the target of DOJ's investigation into handling classified documents. I just like how they're telling Trump, you're going to be indicted again. A heads up that occurred shortly after the ex-president was indicted on federal charges. As the Times notes, it's not clear what aspects of the sprawling investigation the letter may be related to, as there are many to choose from. The probe has examined as an array of schemes that Mr. Trump and his allies used to try to stave off defeat, including events surrounding the January 6, 2021 riot, terrorist attack by his supporters at the Capitol. Let's count the ways here. I've been able to enumerate 12, maybe 13, but definitely 12 different ways the Trump administration attempted to overthrow democracy, to shred the US Constitution. 11 of those means were absolutely illegal. One was legal. It was the remedy through the courts. That was a legal way to overturn the results of an election. Everything else was completely illegal. Now let's read the tea leaves. According to reports, Jack Smith already put Secret Service agents under oath to testify before the federal grand jury, those who were charged with protecting Trump while being president. Now you may say, well, how can a Secret Service agent be compelled to snitch on a president? Well, you have Bill Clinton to thank for that. Bill Clinton is the one who pushed the matter because he did not want Secret Service agents testifying against him in his scandals. Well, guess what? The court said that's not privileged communications. And so that cleared the way for Jack Smith to simply put them under subpoena with no issue. Also, Fulton County, Georgia, under the direction of Fonnie Willis, the DA, is going to indict Trump as well. That is my opinion. Now remember, there are reports of loose affiliation, meaning conversations between Fulton County investigators and federal investigators. And the only thing they have in common is what? Overturning the election. So they are setting motive. They are setting motive. All right, there's more. Witnesses have reportedly been asked about the former president's state of mind. State of mind, that's your motive. As well as efforts to fundraise off his false claims of widespread voter fraud and whether he knew he had lost. Prosecutors have also been scrutinizing efforts to put together slates of so-called fake electors to cast ballots in support of Mr. Trump when the Electoral College tallies were certified. I think the reason why they are looking at state of mind and also the fundraising emails is because they're trying to make a case or possibly look into making a case of fraud, intentional fraud, financial fraud. Steve Bannon engaged in intentional financial fraud. There's more. Trump, of course, spent late 2020 and early 2021 insisting publicly that the election had been stolen from him, held an Oval Office meeting in which invoking martial law and seizing voting machines was discussed. And on January 6, 2021, told his supporters to march to the US Capitol where some of them stormed the building while screaming, "Hang Mike Pence." Trump has said Pence deserved these chants calling for his hanging, and that actually January 6th was Pence's fault. The attack on the Capitol left 5 people dead. Last week, we learned that among others, Trump's own son-in-law, Jared Kushner, testified before the federal grand jury. Here's what I can guarantee. Jared Kushner answered more questions than simply, do you think Trump believed he won or lost? It is going to be another saga, but a necessary one. And for those who say this is a slippery slope, no. This stops the slope from slipping. Max, thoughts?
Well, Donald Trump looks like he's on track to rack up over 100 felony charges. Republicans love to talk about how crime is rising in America, but it seems mostly to be Donald Trump racking them up down in Mar-a-Lago. And Marjorie Taylor Greene was interviewed earlier this week about it, and she said that it didn't feel like America anymore, what was happening. And I actually agree. I mean, it doesn't, because for once the justice system actually seems to be functioning.
Yeah.
It's no surprise that Republicans now want to impeach Merrick Garland and defund Jack Smith and do everything they can to protect Donald Trump, because they know, whether they'll say it or not, that this is really serious.
Yeah, extremely. And Trump knows it as well. In some of his previous interviews after the initial indictment, he seemed extremely deflated, caught off guard by very normative questions under the circumstances. And once again, his attorneys not even present.